Trinity Foster, 40 years old, who lit the match. But to understand how we got there, you have to understand the first time my father killed me without touching my skin. The first tragedy. The day he struck my name from the resort leadership. The day he kicked me, my boyfriend, and our 4-year-old son out of the family mansion like we were strangers who'd overstayed our welcome. That was a Monday in December 2017. I remember the time too clearly because trauma stamps details into your brain like a receipt you can't return. The internal phone rang at 4:15 p.m. while I sat in my office reviewing third-quarter reports at Seabreeze Haven Resort. Our family's pride sitting on the Atlantic coast like a postcard for rich people. 30 luxury suites, a seafood restaurant that tourists lined up for, a private beach stretching almost half a mile. On paper, it was paradise. In reality, it was a kingdom. And my father, Raymond Foster, was the kind of king who loved you most when you obeyed silently. His voice came through the line, brief, cold. Come down to my office. No Trinity. No, how's the report? No warmth. Just an order. I stared at the receiver after the call ended, feeling something crawl up my spine. My dad usually met department heads at this hour. He did inspections. He asked questions. He liked feeling in control. But that voice didn't want updates. It wanted blood. When I walked into his office, he was behind the oak desk, posture rigid, eyes sharp, like he'd already convicted me and was only waiting for me to beg. No greeting. No invitation to sit. Half a minute of silence passed, thick as wet cement. Then, in a low voice, he said, I'm giving you a chance to tell the truth about everything. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. Dad, what do you mean? I asked, already hearing how small my voice sounded in that massive room. He didn't answer. He opened a drawer, took out a cigarette, lit it with slow, deliberate calm. The flame flared, then died, and smoke rose between us like a curtain. He inhaled, exhaled. Then he ground out every word like he wanted them to hurt. You have 10 minutes to decide. After I finish this cigarette, if you still won't tell the truth, pack your stuff and get out of here. And then he stood up and walked out, leaving me alone with the smoke and the ticking clock inside my skull. I stood there like my soul had stepped outside my body, because I didn't know what he was talking about. After graduating with a finance degree from the University of Florida, I came straight back to the family business. CFO. Not a gift, not charity. I earned it, quarter by quarter, audit by audit, late night by late night. For 10 years, I didn't let a single error slip. I checked numbers until my eyes blurred. I rechecked contracts until my fingertips went numb. I lived like the resort's balance sheet was my heartbeat. And now he was looking at me like I was a criminal. Questions slammed into my mind. Had someone lied to him? Was there something I missed? Was this about money, or was it about power? When his footsteps returned 10 minutes later, my throat was dry and my hands were damp. He stepped back into the office like a man entering the final scene of a trial. I was still standing, still searching my memory for something, anything, that could explain why my father had suddenly become a stranger. Dad, I said, forcing steadiness I didn't feel, I have been thinking, but I still don't understand what you're saying. That's when he snapped. You're still denying it? His voice filled the room like a storm breaking windows. You pocketed millions by forging documents. He slammed a thick stack of files onto the desk. The sound echoed off the walls like a gunshot. My hands shook as I stepped forward. Supplier contracts, expense vouchers, transfer documents. At the bottom of every page was my signature and the CFO stamp. My signature, my stamp, my name. But the content? It was unfamiliar, like reading a diary written in my handwriting about a life I never lived. Dad, I whispered, looking up at him, horror tightening my chest. I didn't sign these. That signature is fake. My father laughed. Not a warm laugh, not even a cruel one. It was the laugh of a man who enjoys seeing you realize you're trapped. He yanked open a drawer and threw another folder down with a loud bang. Inside was a professional handwriting analysis report with a fresh red stamp from a reputable firm. Conclusion. The signatures are confirmed to be genuine, not forgeries. Before I could even breathe, my father said, Brandon hired an expert. The result is clear. That signature is yours. The moment I saw the name on the report, my blood went cold. Marvin Patterson, Level 1 Handwriting Analysis Certificate, 25 years of experience, a legend in Florida courtrooms. If Marvin said it was mine, almost no one would dare argue. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Dad, I pleaded, voice breaking despite my efforts. You have to believe me. I didn't do this. That plea only made him worse. His face turned dark. A vein pulsed at his temple. Pack your stuff and get out of Seabreeze Haven within 24 hours, he roared. You're a coward who dares to do it but won't admit it. I tried again. I begged. I swore. He raised a hand to stop me like he was bored of hearing my voice. His face went flat. Ice. No emotion left. He turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. I dropped into the chair, gripping my head. How could an expert like Marvin be fooled? Who could forge my signature so perfectly? And why was Brandon, the brother who always wanted what I had, the one discovering the fraud? The picture became clear in my mind with terrifying speed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a trap. And there was only one person who benefited from me being erased. Brandon. By 6:00 p.m., I was driving home to the family mansion, a nearly 5,000 square foot waterfront monster we'd lived in for 3 generations. In recent years, my small family and Brandon's family lived there too, under my parents' roof like we were all still children playing house. When I walked in, I saw my mother, Eleanor, sitting on the sofa. Brandon was next to her, and his wife, Cassandra, was smiling like life was sweet. They were laughing, relaxed, like no one had just torn my world apart. I didn't even think. I moved on pure heat. I stormed into the living room, grabbed Brandon by the collar, and yanked him up from his chair. My voice came out raw. Why did you set me up? My mother jumped up, face pale. Cassandra screamed and lunged for my arms, trying to pry me off him. Trinity, stop, my mother cried, shaking. Whatever's wrong, talk calmly. Why are you acting like this? I turned to her with a bitter laugh that tasted like metal. How can I be calm when he's framing me, when he's destroying my life? Brandon straightened his collar slowly, too calmly. Then he looked at me with contempt and said, Nobody's framing you. You embezzled millions. I just exposed the truth. Cassandra stepped forward immediately, voice sharp and proud. That's right. Brandon is protecting the family. My husband did the right thing. And that's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. Because innocent people don't speak like they're rehearsing lines. They speak like they're scared. Brandon and Cassandra weren't scared. They were celebrating. I stepped closer, pointing at Brandon's face. You forged my signature, I hissed. You orchestrated everything. The living room felt like it could catch fire. Brandon opened his mouth to answer, and the front door swung open. My father walked in. His face was red with rage. Everyone shut up! The room froze like a statue garden. Silence swallowed us. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, light, cautious. Nathan came down first, eyes tight with worry. And behind him was Austin, my 4-year-old. Clutching Nathan's hand like he could feel the danger in the air, even if he didn't understand it. My father's gaze swept the room, then landed on me. And whatever fatherly affection used to live there was gone. In a cold voice, he declared, From now on, Trinity and her family are out of Seabreeze Haven and out of this mansion. He said it like he was reading a policy, not destroying his daughter. She embezzled nearly $1 million. Unforgivable. I rushed toward him, hands out, desperate. Dad, please, believe me. I didn't do this, I swear. He didn't even flinch. His eyes shifted past me to Nathan and Austin on the stairs. Your family has 24 hours to leave, he said. I won't call the police. Consider it mercy. And then, like he wanted to carve it into my bones, he added, From this moment, you're no longer my daughter. That sentence didn't just hurt. It rewrote my life. He turned and walked up the stairs without looking back once. Each step sounded like a nail being hammered into the coffin of our relationship. When he disappeared, Brandon brushed past me, shoulder bumping mine on purpose. Cassandra paused just long enough to smile. Serves you right, thief. And then my mother, my own mother, walked up to me with eyes full of disappointment and distance, like I was something she regretted making. I'm disappointed in you, Trinity, she said coldly. Really disappointed. Then she turned away, and suddenly the mansion felt enormous. Empty, like the walls themselves had decided I didn't belong. Only 3 of us remained in the living room. Me, Nathan, and Austin, too small to understand why adults were suddenly monsters. Austin slipped down the stairs, eyes red from crying, and wrapped his tiny arms around my leg. That simple hug broke whatever pride I had left. Tears spilled before I could stop them. I scooped him up, pressing my face into his hair, trying to hide the shaking. Nathan came to my side without a single question and rested his hand on my shoulder. Quiet support, steady as a heartbeat. 10 minutes later, when Austin dozed off against Nathan's chest, I told Nathan everything. The office, the forged documents, the handwriting report, Brandon's name. I waited for doubt, for fear, for that look people get when they start calculating whether you're worth the risk. But Nathan didn't give me any of it. He just took my hand and said, gentle but firm, Let's go. I blinked at him. Go where? Anywhere, he said, eyes locked on mine, as long as it's far from here. I shook my head hard, voice cracking. I can't leave. I gave 10 years of my life to that resort. I'm innocent, Nathan. I have to stay and prove it. Nathan leaned closer, his voice lower, steadier. I believe you, he said. Completely. But they don't. Your father doesn't. Your mother doesn't. Brandon is trying to erase you, and staying here won't fix it. He squeezed my hand like he was anchoring me. You're not trapped. You're just hurt. And hurt people think they have to keep bleeding to prove they were stabbed. His words landed deep, because he was right. I looked at Austin's sleeping face, peaceful and unaware, and I realized something terrifying. If I stayed to fight, my son would grow up inside a war zone that called itself family. Finally, I nodded. Okay, I whispered, we go. That night, we packed only essentials. 5 suitcases of clothes, Austin's favorite toys, and important documents. I didn't take anything valuable. I didn't want them accusing me again. And as we left the mansion under the cover of darkness, I told myself one thing, quietly, like a prayer that burned. Someday, I would prove my innocence. Someday, Brandon would pay for what he did. But tonight? Tonight, I only had one job, protect my real family. And survive long enough to come back with the truth. The first week after we left the mansion, we didn't feel free. We felt hunted. Not because anyone was actually chasing us down the highway, but because when your own family brands you a thief, you start hearing their voices everywhere, inside every silence, behind every closed door, in the suspicious glance of strangers who don't even know your name. We checked into a hotel near Orlando International Airport, the kind with bright lobby lights that never turn off, and carpets that smell like old perfume and bleach. Austin thought it was an adventure. Are we on vacation? He asked, bouncing on the bed like nothing in the world had changed. Nathan forced a smile and said, yeah, buddy, a little trip. I didn't correct him. Because how do you explain betrayal to a 4-year-old? How do you tell your child that the people who should have loved you the most just voted to erase you? Every night after Austin fell asleep, Nathan and I sat at the small table by the window, the city lights outside blinking like distant warnings. Boston, Seattle, Denver, Chicago. We said the names out loud like prayers. Like if we picked the right place, the pain wouldn't follow. Nathan did most of the talking because I was still stuck on one image, my father's hand raised to stop me from speaking, like my voice had become an inconvenience. I keep thinking, I finally said one night, staring at the hotel curtains. What if I stay and fight? What if I prove it? Nathan didn't argue. He never did the cheap thing, never told me I was wrong for feeling what I felt. He just said quietly, Trinity, you can't win a trial when the judge is your father and the jury is your mother. That sentence hit harder than my father's words, because it was true. The evidence had already been stamped, signed, and believed. And the worst part? It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, or rather, the fact that mine had been worthless to them. In the end, we chose Chicago. Not because it was perfect, but because it was far enough that Orlando couldn't reach into our lives every day. We booked the next available flight. I remember standing at the airport with Austin's little backpack in my hand, watching families hug goodbye at gates, and thinking, some people say goodbye because they have to. I said goodbye because I was forced. On the plane, Austin slept with his head on Nathan's shoulder, mouth slightly open, eyelashes resting against his cheeks like nothing could touch him. I watched him and felt something hot behind my eyes. Not just sadness, a kind of fear I'd never known before. Because if my father could throw me away so easily, what else was my family capable of? When we landed, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like it didn't care who my father was or what my last name meant. We didn't buy a house right away. I wouldn't let us. I rented a small place in Lincoln Park, a quiet neighborhood with trees and sidewalks and a school nearby. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't Foster standard, but it was ours. And for the first time in my life, I realized how heavy it had been to live under my parents' roof. When you live in someone else's kingdom, you're never truly safe. You're just tolerated until you're not. I threw myself into job hunting. Not because I was confident, but because panic looks a lot like motivation when you have a child depending on you. I polished my resume until it looked like a version of me who'd never been broken. I didn't mention Seabreeze Haven in interviews as the family resort. I called it what it really was, a corporation, because I refused to let my father's name define my value. 1 week into searching, I got an interview with a furniture company called Oakwood Interiors. A week after that, the owner, Mr. Oakwood, called me personally. His voice was calm, direct. Trinity Foster, we'd like to offer you the CFO position. I held the phone in both hands like it was fragile. The salary wasn't as high as the resort, but it was enough. Enough to breathe, enough to build, enough to never go back crawling. I accepted immediately. And when I hung up, Nathan wrapped his arms around me so tightly my ribs ached. "I knew you'd do it," he murmured. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because every success tasted bittersweet. Every time I sat in Oakwood's boardroom, confident and composed, a small part of me still heard Brandon's voice. "You embezzled millions. I exposed the truth." Like he'd planted the lie in the air and assumed it would grow roots in every room I entered. For a while, I did what I had to do. I rebuilt. I paid bills. I attended Austin's school events. I cooked dinners. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. But at night, when Nathan fell asleep, I sometimes stared at the ceiling and whispered the same questions into the dark. How did Marvin Patterson, the best handwriting expert in Florida, confirm a forgery? Who paid him? Who coached him? And why did my father never once look at me and say, "Even if I'm angry, I want to hear you"? Because that was the real wound. Not the money, not the job, not even the exile. It was the way my father chose Brandon's truth over my soul. 7 years passed. 7 years is long enough to convince yourself you're over something. Long enough to stop flinching when a phone rings. Long enough to stop waking up angry. Long enough to almost believe you've made peace. Austin grew. His voice deepened. His questions got sharper. Sometimes he asked about Grandpa Raymond, usually in casual ways, like a child poking at a scar to see if it still hurts. Did Grandpa like fishing? Did he ever have a dog? Did he really own a beach? I answered carefully, always watching Nathan's face. Because Nathan didn't hate my father the way I did. Nathan hated what my father did to me. But he always left room for the possibility that people are complicated, that kindness and cruelty can live inside the same person. I didn't. To me, my father's cruelty had been a verdict. A final sentence. A door slammed so hard it shook my entire life. And then, in October 2024, that door opened again. Not with warmth. With death. It was a Wednesday. Midweek. I was sitting in a conference room with Mr. Oakwood and senior management, discussing expansion plans into the Eastern market. My phone buzzed once. I declined. Buzzed again. I ignored it. Then a text came through with an Orlando area code. "Hello, I'm Matthew Williams, lawyer for Mr. Raymond Foster. I want to inform you that Mr. Raymond passed away at 9:00 a.m. today at Orlando Regional Medical Center. Please contact me as soon as possible." For a second, my brain refused to translate those words. Like grief can be delayed by disbelief. I read it 3 times. Then my hands started shaking. Not because I loved my father, not because we were close, but because death has a way of reopening things you thought were sealed forever. I excused myself from the meeting so quickly the chairs behind me scraped the floor. Inside my private office, I called the number. A deep male voice answered. "Ms. Foster, I'm sorry to inform you." I cut him off gently because hearing it again felt like being hit twice. "I understand." He told me the funeral details. Sunday 2 p.m., Riverside Funeral Home in Orlando. Then, the part that made my stomach twist. "Before he passed, Mr. Foster instructed me to contact you. He hoped you would attend." Hoped. As if hope still existed between us. As if he hadn't personally severed it. When I hung up, I sat in my office for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Memories surfaced uninvited. My father teaching me how to hold a bat. My father's hand on my shoulder when I got accepted into college. My father smiling, proud, telling people, "That's my girl." And then, like a shadow swallowing the light, the final memory replaced them all. His cold eyes. His voice. "You're no longer my daughter." That's the thing about loss. It doesn't just take the person. It takes your chance at rewriting the ending. That night, after dinner, I sat Nathan and Austin down in the living room. My voice came out flat, like I didn't own it. "Grandpa Raymond died." Nathan's eyes widened. Austin frowned, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Austin stood up without a word and rushed upstairs. Nathan started to rise. I lifted a hand. "Wait." A minute later, Austin came back down, holding a small walnut wood box, about 6 inches wide, carved with intricate patterns, like someone had spent hours shaping it with care. He held it out to me with both hands. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think you need to see this." I stared at the box like it was a bomb. "I've never seen this," I whispered. "Where did it come from?" Austin swallowed, then said the sentence that made my blood turn to ice. "Grandpa gave it to me." Nathan's head snapped up. "What?" Austin looked down at his feet, fingers tightening around the box as if he expected me to explode. "He said, after he died, I had to give it to you." I felt the room tilt. My voice trembled. "Austin, when did you meet Grandpa?" Austin hesitated, and in that hesitation, I felt something awful rising, a shape of a truth I didn't want. Nathan's voice turned careful, soft. "Buddy, did you see him recently?" Austin nodded. "Once. Then again, faster. For 2 years. 2 years. I didn't breathe. Austin's eyes filled with fear. He rushed the words out like he needed to dump them before I crushed him with my reaction. He came to Chicago every 2 months. He'd wait outside after school when I was waiting for the bus. He'd buy me ice cream. He'd ask about school. He'd tell stories about you when you were little. The room went quiet except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Nathan's face tightened. Shock, anger, confusion, all battling at once. I forced myself to speak slowly because Austin was still just a child. Why didn't you tell us? Austin's voice shook. He told me not to. He said it was our secret. He said you and him had misunderstandings, and if you knew, you wouldn't let me see him. That's when something inside me cracked. Not because my son kept a secret, but because my father taught him how. My father, who called me a thief, erased me, exiled me, still found a way to reach into my life. Not through me, through my child. I should have been furious. I was furious. But beneath the anger, there was something else. A strange ache, because if Raymond hated me so much, why did he come? Why did he care about Austin? Why leave a box? Nathan's hand touched my shoulder, grounding me. Open it, he said quietly. Let's see what he wanted. I stared at the carved lid. My hands were shaking as I took the box from Austin. And as I lifted it, I had the sudden, chilling sensation that whatever was inside wasn't just paper. It was a trapdoor to the past, to the truth, to a war I thought I had escaped. I opened the lid, and what I saw inside made my throat close, because lying on top was a thick, ivory-colored envelope, sealed like a promise. And next to it, a faded photograph. Me and my father, when I was 10 years old, standing beside a giant yellowfin tuna we'd caught together, one of the happiest days of my childhood. My fingers brushed the photo, and for a split second I forgot how to hate him. Then I picked up the envelope. The seal was tight, deliberate, like my father wanted to make sure the truth stayed intact until the right moment. I looked at Nathan, then at Austin, watching me with wide eyes, and I tore it open. The papers inside the envelope were heavier than they looked. Not physically, emotionally. The first page was a letter written in my father's handwriting. Not the stiff, formal kind he used for contracts, but the slanted, familiar strokes I remembered from birthday cards and old fishing notes. My vision blurred as I read. Trinity, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it also means I was a coward while I was alive. That single sentence broke something open in my chest. I sat down hard on the couch, the letter shaking in my hands, and kept reading. I made the greatest mistake of my life when I chose silence over you. I believed lies because believing them was easier than admitting I failed you as a father. Nathan sat beside me without speaking. Austin leaned against his side, quiet now, sensing the weight of something far bigger than him. The letter went on. My father admitted he had doubts from the very beginning, about the forged documents, about Marvin Patterson's report, about Brandon's sudden discovery. He wrote that something felt wrong, but pride stopped him from reopening the investigation. I punished you to protect my illusion of control, and by the time I realized the truth, I no longer knew how to face you. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. Then came the part that made my heart pound. Inside this envelope are copies of documents I ordered in secret. I didn't have the courage to clear your name while I lived, so I prepared the truth to survive me. I flipped through the stack with trembling fingers. There were bank transfer records, payments from Brandon and Cassandra to Marvin Patterson, emails, short, coded, damning. And at the bottom, a DNA test request form dated 2 years earlier. I gasped. Nathan leaned in. What is it? My voice came out hoarse. He tested Brandon. The room went silent. My father had suspected something far darker than forged signatures. I suddenly understood why his health collapsed so quickly in his final year, why he became distant, brittle, haunted. He wasn't just dying of illness. He was dying under the weight of truth. When I finished reading, I felt hollow and full at the same time. Nathan spoke first. We have to go back for the funeral. I nodded. Not because I wanted closure, but because whatever my father started wasn't finished. The funeral. Riverside Funeral Home smelled like lilies and polished wood, too clean for something so final. When we walked through the doors, conversations died mid-sentence. About 30 people were there, distant relatives, business partners, old family friends. And standing at the front, near the casket, were Brandon, Cassandra, and my mother. They froze when they saw me. For a moment, none of them moved. Brandon's face drained of color like he'd seen a ghost he thought he'd buried alive. Then he recovered. Too quickly. He stepped forward, blocking our path. You have a lot of nerve showing up here, he hissed. You're not welcome. Cassandra's eyes flicked to Austin, then back to me, sharp with hatred. Yeah, she snapped. What are you here for? Pretending to mourn so you can grab inheritance? My mother stepped closer, voice low and cold. Trinity, respect your father's funeral. Leave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm still his daughter, I said calmly. Legally and biologically, I have the right to be here. That's when Matthew Williams, my father's lawyer, stepped in. Ms. Foster is correct, he said firmly. If this continues, I'll call security. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. Cassandra shot me a look full of venom. We took seats in the back. Throughout the service, I stared at the casket, at the polished wood separating me from a man who destroyed me and tried, too late, to save me. When the service ended and we moved to Oak Hill Cemetery, I watched Brandon and Cassandra closely. They weren't grieving. They were waiting, smiling. Like predators watching a locked door they were sure would open. As we walked away, Brandon leaned toward me and whispered smugly, Dad left everything to me. You won't get a cent. I smiled, not because I was confident, but because I knew something he didn't. The will hasn't been read yet, I said softly. His laugh echoed behind me. 30 days later, at exactly 8:00 a.m. on a Monday, we sat in Matthew Williams' office for the will reading. Brandon and my mother were already there. When we walked in, Brandon shot to his feet. Is there a mistake? He demanded. Why is she here? My mother added sharply. My husband kicked her out 7 years ago. She's not family. Matthew adjusted his glasses. Your husband specifically requested her presence. Cassandra couldn't contain herself. She stood abruptly and marched toward us. She didn't look at me. She bent down, straight toward my son, and screamed, Why is this stupid Leech here? Get out right now. The room froze. I stepped between her and Austin in one movement. Who did you just call a leech? I asked quietly. She leaned closer, fearless. Your whole family are leeches. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. The slap cracked through the room. Cassandra screamed. Matthew stood calmly. I saw nothing except an adult verbally abusing a minor. Police arrived minutes later. But not for me. They went straight to Brandon. And that's when the world finally tilted back into balance. Matthew began reading. I, Raymond Foster, leave all assets to my daughter, Trinity Foster. Brandon screamed. Cassandra accused. My mother shook. I stayed seated, because I'd already read the ending. The police cuffed Brandon and Cassandra for fraud and forgery. And then I stood up. I pulled out the confession letter. This, I said evenly, is Marvin Patterson's written confession before he died. He admitted falsifying the handwriting report after being paid by Brandon and Cassandra. Brandon collapsed into denial, but the officers already had warrants. As they were restrained, I turned to my mother. How did it feel, I asked softly, to lie for 42 years? She went pale. Then I dropped the truth. Brandon isn't Dad's biological son. The room shattered. DNA results followed. My mother collapsed. And then, one final knife. I leaned close to Brandon and whispered, Anthony isn't yours. Cassandra fell to the floor sobbing. Brandon stared at nothing. Part 5. What blood couldn't fix. The trial was swift. 10 years each. Millions repaid. The resort restored. I returned to Orlando, not as a victim, but as its rightful owner. Nathan stood beside me. Austin grew strong. But my mother? Some wounds don't heal. Some truths arrive too late. Standing on the balcony of Seabreeze Haven now, watching the ocean stretch endlessly ahead, I finally understand. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who refuses to abandon you when the lie would be easier. My story ends here.